Chinese warships were a long way from home when they were spotted in the Tasman Sea. But it's how we found out about the ships that's even more alarming. Now the government and Defence Force are facing serious questions over why it was a Virgin Australia pilot who first alerted authorities.
Over the past week, we have seen the deployment of a highly capable People's Liberation Army task group to conduct live fire activities in the Tasman Sea.
This is the group of Chinese warships causing concern off Australia's coastline, with the ripples now flowing into the nation's capital.
The government expects the PLA provide ample warning about live fire activities.
Defence Secretary Greg Moriarty and Chief of the Defence Force, Admiral David Johnston, today being grilled at a Senate Estimates Committee.
Do you have any update on your belief about their intended route?
Senator, of course, that's a question the Chinese can most authoritatively answer.
This morning, the ships were 250 kilometres south of Hobart, but it's a live firing exercise in international waters last Friday that's revealing potential flaws in our defence capabilities. On that day, the Prime Minister said we did know about it.
It is the case that the notice was given. When that occurs, airlines are notified and stay out of the area.
But it's now emerged that wasn't quite right.
A very unusual, most unusual circumstance.
At 9:30 on Friday morning, the Chinese task group begins its live firing drill in the Tasman Sea, 640 kilometres off Australia's coast. Almost half an hour later, 9:58 a.m, the Chinese broadcast an alert of the live firing exercise. It's a Virgin pilot who relays the message back to Air Services Australia, the first time our authorities became aware of the potential risk. Air Services Australia then issues a warning to all planes flying across the Tasman to avoid the warships. It also alerts Defence's Joint Operations Command.
The limited notice provided by the PLAN could have unnecessarily increased the risk to aircraft and vessels in the area.
Andrew Marshall is an A330 captain and president of the Australian and International Pilots Association.
It is quite concerning when any warship, in this instance, decides to undertake a live firing exercise with no notice.
The Chinese warning specified an area of danger up to an altitude of 15,000 metres. Commercial flights usually operate around 10,000 metres, bringing a genuine risk of potential catastrophe without an alert pilot.
Quite risky to be in an area, obviously, where projectiles are being fired from a ship. But we're well trained as pilots, obviously, to handle diversions.
Most navies provide air traffic authorities a minimum of 8 hours notice for any live firing exercise to eliminate the risk of accidents.
You know, we hear these transmissions quite a lot, obviously, when we fly across the South China Sea. So it's not an unusual thing to hear. It's certainly an unusual thing to hear between Australia and New Zealand.
Liberal Senator James Paterson was today able to draw out an admission that Defence chiefs first learned of the live firing from the Virgin pilot.
My question actually was when, not how. When did Defence first learn of the activity?
We were first notified of it by Air Services on the morning of the event.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese providing a different account today.
The New Zealand task force was aware at the same time. There were two means. New Zealand notified the Australian Defence Force.
So is it the case that Defence was only notified via Virgin and Air Services Australia 28 minutes after the firing window commenced?
Yes.
Right, so this is an important development.
And his story seems to be at odds with the version given by the Chief of the Defence Force in estimates. And these are very serious questions that the Prime Minister needs to answer.
Sam Roggeveen is Director of the International Security Program at the Lowy Institute. He says the incident will raise questions around Australia's defence spending.
What Australia needs to do is focus on defending the air and maritime approaches to Australia. unfortunately, the Defence Force that we're building is really not designed for that at all.
The AUKUS program, building nuclear-powered submarines, will cost more than $300 billion, but their main role won't be on our shores.
Those are designed essentially to operate off China's coast in concert with the Americans. Now, we know particularly from the evidence of the last month or so, that the United States is far less reliable a partner than it used to be.
And while the Chinese warship's presence so deep in Australian waters is rattling for us all, Sam Roggeveen believes cool heads must prevail.
I think when you're a middle power up against a great power, when you escalate, you lose. I think it's far better for Australia to continue the quiet work of modernising our Defence Force.
Yeah, it's certainly rattling though, and a lot more questions need to be answered. And this is a major concern considering that it's our national security that is at stake.